question, but that's all right.
Because we have to move on to our main topic because it's already 2:00 Eastern. And so, okay, endangerment finding. This is our favorite thing to talk about because it is one of the main pillars of, as Lee Zeldin told Breitbart, the Holy Grail of the climate change religion. It certainly is an important pillar for American regulation and policy when it comes to climate issues. So basically, it came from a 2007 Supreme Court case that decided the Clean Air Act was broad enough to include carbon dioxide, but it did not direct EPA to regulate it. But here's how Zeldin's EPA describes its construction by the Obama EPA. So this is what they did, which was pretty sneaky. So they say, slicing and dicing the language of the statute, it made an endangerment finding totally separate from any actual rulemaking setting standards for emissions from cars. EPA argued it had the authority to do this because Congress didn't specifically forbid it from taking the approach. So the endangerment finding intentionally ignored costs of regulations that EPA knew would follow, and indeed ignored any other policy impacts from those regulations. The finding also took an unorthodox approach with the alleged pollutant at issue. It focused not solely on carbon dioxide, but on a mix of 6 gases, some of which cars don't even emit. Contrary to popular belief, the finding never makes a straight-line conclusion that carbon dioxide from new motor vehicle engines is causing endangerment. Instead, it looked at the mix of 6 gases from all sources over the world and used multiple mental leaps to determine that this mix contributed, not caused, an unknown amount above zero to climate change, and that climate change contributed, not caused, an unknown amount above zero of endangerment to public health. So Just the News did a story covering an Earth Day report that the Heartland Institute and our allies released about why we should reverse the finding and what it's actually going to take to get it there. So I'd like to go to our panel here, especially Sterling, because you were actually quoted in the Just the News piece, and I believe that you contributed to that Earth Day report as well. So I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, well, the endangerment finding was the way the court ruled. It said anything emitted into the air is a pollutant. Basically, that's what it determined. If it's emitted by humans into the air, it's a pollutant. It doesn't matter if it's a necessary gas, doesn't matter if there's background levels of it. If we emit it, the court determined under the Clean Air Act, it's a pollutant. And that justifies the EPA regulating if it finds it endangers human health and welfare or the environment even. The EPA, they didn't do any independent research. As you say, they say contributed some unknown amount. They based their stuff on the IPCC's reports, which were based on computer models, which said at some time in the future, really, really bad things would happen. And here are the things that we're predicting might happen. And that with that, they went forward. And it was a bad court decision. Clearly not everything emitted into the air is a pollutant. Certainly not cognizable under the Clean Air Act. How do we know this? Well, the authors of the Clean Air Act, who were still around, some of whom were still around when the court ruling came, including Democrat John Dingell, said, we never intended greenhouse gases to count as pollutants. Why? That gives a single regulatory agency the authority to control the entire economy because it relies on fossil fuels. We never intended to give the EPA the authority to control the economy. So now we are where we are. The Endangerment Act finding is the foundation for every climate regulation from any department. The subsidies, you refer back to the endangerment finding. We got to do this because the EPA says we must reduce greenhouse gases. Why? Because it endangers human health and welfare. You get rid of this, you pull the rug out from under, not just things from the EPA on power plants, not just car standards, because there'll be some car standards that still be around. CAFE standards weren't tied to the endangerment finding. They pre-existed it. Not just things from the USDA, the Defense Department, all the other things. Every climate rule or regulation is built upon this single endangerment finding. The whole social cost of carbon came out of the endangerment finding. So if they're able to get rid of this, then other administrations, whoever comes next, won't be able to build on that, at least not as easily. So are there ways to get rid of it? Yeah. The first way is through the regulatory process that brought it into existence in the first place. It's a long, drawn-out process. You have to do scientific findings saying it's not justified after all, or it was, but it's not no longer. That has to have public hearings and public notice, and there'll be court cases. The other way is Congress to get off its butt and pass a law that makes it clear, no, Supreme Court, but CO2 is not in the law because we never intended CO2 to be in the law. So don't make it up as if it is in the law. But Congress has to pass it through both houses of Congress, and it'll be filibustered in the Senate. The fourth way, and in some sense, it's the third and fourth way to get together. Trump just issued a rule that says all regulations that violate Supreme Court rulings must go. And the Supreme Court ruling in climate that he's talking about is West Virginia v. EPA. An earlier court said the EPA has the authority to regulate CO2. In West Virginia v. EPA, the Supreme Court said in two cases. One is they said we shouldn't necessarily defer to agency rulings, but in West Virginia, it said if there is a major question, we can't just defer to the agencies. That should be done by Congress explicitly. And there is no more major question than fossil fuels, which are the basis for the entire economy. That is as major a question as you can get. So basically, West Virginia would overturn mass. So how do you get to that? Well, Steve Malloy, one of our board members, suggested all the agencies have to do is just refer to this executive order, refer to West Virginia v. EPA, and scrap it, not go through all the process because the court has ruled, and then let them sue and say, well, the court didn't mean that. But in the meantime, they're gone. The other way is for attorneys generals of the states or the federal attorney general to sue to block these climate regulations, saying they violate West Virginia v. EPA. So will they take any of those paths? The Trump administration has put out a lot of orders and rulings, and many of his appointees have followed through on those things. Some are slower than others, but this is key. And if they do what his last executive order about that said, which is get rid of any regulations that violate the Supreme Court rulings, that could be a quick way to get rid of the endangerment finding. And then you let the environmentalists sue who are on the defensive. They're just scattered now. They're getting hammered in so many ways with all of Trump's rules. They would challenge that, but I'm not convinced with the current makeup of the court that they'd necessarily win that challenge.
Trump has a big asset this time around that he didn't have in his first term, which is the relentless and Loper Bright decisions of the Supreme Court last year, in which the court set up the basically getting rid of the whole Chevron deference. So the idea of the Chevron deference case is that if a federal agency or department makes a rule under the laws from Congress that have been signed by the president, if they make a rule, then the court accepts that the courts all the way up to the Supreme Court accept that rule is accurate and good and right, as long as it's not obviously unreasonable. Well, there's as Sterling has pointed out, there's nothing in that there's no excuse for the endangerment finding. So it appears to me that the Trump administration and Trump is really his EOs already have gotten rid of the endangerment finding. They just haven't said it. So it's that if they declare that the endangerment finding is was an excessive choice by previous administrations, they don't have to enforce it, and they can change it on their own, and the Supreme Court decisions will back that up. So if that goes to the Supreme Court, I believe they're going to win, and so it's a little different from the way it was a few years ago.
Yeah, well, you got to remember, John Roberts found against Mass v. EPA. He was in the minority there, and he's if anything a centrist on the court. If he's against it, with the new appointees that we've got, there's a pretty good chance that what they would say is, look, if Congress has taken it up before and they've turned it down, regulating CO2 through taxes, through cap and trade. They considered them. They didn't pass any bills. If Congress wants to regulate CO2, the court could find it's Congress's job to do it, not any agency.
Right. And I think the court knew that that implication was there last year when they made these decisions. Right. So this is all set up for a very good positive change.
Let's remember that the EPA stole this authority. This was not granted to, as Sterling's pointed out, was not granted by Congress or anybody else. They just declared that, you know what, we're just going to consider carbon dioxide emissions from humans only. The carbon dioxide emissions from the oceans, I guess, is not a pollutant, but the carbon dioxide emissions of humans is a pollutant, and so are cow farts, apparently, especially if they're on human farms. But wild buffaloes, that's not a pollutant when they fart. I don't know. And so let's just remember that this is a remarkable thing, and one of the great things about the results of the 2024 election, because this is an EPA has no clothes moment, because we are now returning, hopefully, to the reality-based world. We are resetting our assumptions. We are correcting the fiction that human emissions of carbon dioxide is harmful and therefore must be regulated as a pollutant that is harmful to human health and also to the health of the planet itself. That's a fiction. That's a fiction EPA grabbed, that created, so it could seize power that it was never granted to rule over your life. And so that fiction is going away thanks to the results of the 2024 election. Getting rid of this, having this EPA has no clothes moment, getting back to this reality-based world is akin to saying, that the earth is not the center of the universe, or that trans women are not actually female human beings. What? That's right, which are two fictions that were pretty much conventional wisdom in human civilization, one from quite a while ago, and one, news out of the UK, is starting to crumble right now in the Western world. So the importance of this, and we've covered it on the Climate Realism show that will not be aired tomorrow on Friday, as usual, because it's Good Friday, which is why we're having this crossover event today on the In the Tank podcast. But, we're going to continue to talk about the endangerment finding, and it's going to be a slow process. You think about all the things, actually, hopefully it's going to be a quick process, because you think about all the things that the Trump administration is trying to accomplish. I think today or yesterday or maybe tomorrow is the official 100-day mark of Trump's second term. Usually that is a big deal in the media. Donald Trump has tried to do and done so many things. He did so many things in the first 10 days. That would have been enormous accomplishments in the first 100 days. So this day is coming and going with nobody really marking the time. And the reason Donald Trump is in a hurry is because you see what's happening right now is that the left and his political opponents and the opponents of the reality-based world are trying to use the course to delay this as much as possible, even if it's fruitless. A week-long delay, a month-long delay, a 6-month delay. They just need to get to basically about this time next year, when Congress starts to run for their midterm elections. And they think if they can stop half of this stuff through the courts, they'll consider that, mission accomplished. This, I think, is going to be something they will not be able to stop. This is where the flood the zone strategy by the Trump administration is having dividends. This is the one that's actually, for sure, I think, going to get through.
Well, yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see what difference it really makes. Because Trump is in for 4 years, right? And then who knows what's going to happen after that. So we need to start. I mean, Congress needs to start making stuff permanent in as much as it can, because they've really not done anything except for spend more money, it seems, in the last couple of months here. I'd like to go to Sam on that a bit. I mean, what's the likelihood that we can actually get some of Trump's reforms when it comes to EPA and stuff, like, actually passed into law, instead of just instructing the current, unelected bureaucracies to just stop being crazy for 3 years until the next administration comes in, and then they can just go back to being crazy, right?
I think it's unlikely that much of this will get passed into law, simply because the Congress is exceedingly cowardly, and I refer to the Republicans there, not the Democrats. They're solid. They know what they're doing. I don't think much of this will get passed into law. I would love to see it, of course, but I don't think we'll get that. So this is why you have to. But once you establish these things, that, for example, the endangerment finding, once you get rid of that, I don't see how you can bring it back. It's especially if the opponents of that move are foolish enough to bring it before the courts and get a Supreme Court decision saying, no, that's an overreach there. You're not going to get it back. It would require Congress actually to pass that, to say that CO2 is a pollutant. I guess Congress has said falsehoods in the past, so it wouldn't be impossible. But I don't see that going through. So the unfortunate thing is that we will not get much out of Congress, I don't think, especially because if you look at the first Trump administration, once they got the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act finished, they really didn't do much. This is an extraordinarily cowardly and craven group of people over there, and the getting these things passed into law is going to be difficult. But I do think that in most of these cases, getting them knocked out administratively through the executive branch will actually perhaps suffice.
The endangerment finding is the foundation for so many things, climate related, but they can try and do the same things through other rules, getting at other pollutants, right? Mercury, particulate matter. What this shows very, very clearly, I think the most important, to me, the most important single piece of legislation Congress could pass, not just for now, but for all time, is something called the REINS Act, Regulations of the Executive in Need of Scrutiny. That basically says any regulation that would impose we write a law, the executive agencies write the regulations that are supposed to enforce the law, but we, as Congress, because we're the only ones authorized under the Constitution to write laws, we should have to approve those regulations. Now, they set a threshold. Let's say if it's $100 million impact on the economy, it must come back to Congress for an up or down vote on the regulation. This is good for two reasons. First off, it holds Congress accountable for these regulations. Congress will no longer be able to defer and say, "Oh, we didn't intend that but we can't rescind it because of, whatever reason. We didn't intend it, but we can't rescind it. It's all their fault." No, it's Congress's fault because they could stop it with the REINS Act. It also, has the benefit of shining the light on these things. So many of these things just go under the radar because Congress doesn't review these regulations until people are complaining and challenging it. And then they say, "Oh, well, you get the filibuster. We can't get it withdrawn," or "It's a good law. It just needs to be modified." And then they never modify it. The REINS Act would stop it all because they don't even have to, under the REINS Act, if they don't have an up or down vote, the regulation does not become law. If they have an up or down vote and it fails, it does not become law. The only way it becomes law is if Congress actually approves the regulation. And then you have them on the record and you can blame them next election time. I think that would be good for That's across the board. That's every agency. That's and Congress can actually have to act some.
Yeah, as one of our viewers pointed out, Joel, there, he said Congress is useless. All they do is investigate things. Yeah, I'm slowly coming to believe that our current Congress is just a re-election clip monologue generating device, and they